next little projects, if you like. And these are the clip-on type handlebars which are fixed to the top of the fork legs, and they're okay, but they are a bit of a stretch. I adjusted them so that they obviously cleared the tank on full lock. Don't want to be any trapped thumbs or broken fingers. It's not an MV Augusta. I tried originally to get these really adjustable. So again, they'll fit on the same with the fork yokes, but they do have an infinitely adjustable with a bolt, which you can then adjust up and down and in any way, shape or form. So I might just look into hopefully flatten them out a little bit and maybe bring them back slightly. Maybe not the full-on cafe racer look, but I've got to ride the thing after all. One of the other jobs I'm doing is, as part of changing these handlebars over to these adjustable clip-ons, is the throttle. Two things. One, these handlebars aren't quite as wide, so I had to trim down the throttle grip itself so that it slid further onto the original Moto Guzzi grip. But also the two throttle cables, the pull and return, appear to be on the standard bike above all the control gear like this, and I want them down here like most other bikes. Let's be facing forwards. Problem was, cables were too long and they were bunching up. Now I'm using these radial type pistons on these master cylinders. The actual reservoir itself it's all getting a bit clustered and a bit messy, so I'm going to move it underneath. So I thought, right, I'll cut down the cable. So I'll cut down the sheathing and trim the things, and these cables are the original length, and they've been reduced by approximately 4 to 5 inches. Now you can't get the cable out of the inner sleeve and the throttle assembly, and I need to cut the nipples off, which I've done, and put some new nipples on. Of course, there lies the problem. You can't, it's very difficult. I say can't, I'm sure someone somewhere has or does, but it's very difficult to get the right size nipple. I've purchased many nipple and brake throttle cable kits, and they're all too big. So what I've done is, because I'm going to solder them on, and here's one I tested out earlier by soldering it on, and I have to say, I think, yeah, you can focus on that, that's only half full of solder. But I tinned the cable first, the wire cable, and used just a normal, I think it's 25-watt soldering iron. It does take a while to heat up sufficiently for the electrical pre-flux solder to run in there. So I thought I'd give it a try, see if that's actually going to be strong enough. And I can't shift it, not in a vise and a hammer and mole grips and everything. So that's what I'm doing. But all of the nipples are all too big. They're all sort of 6-7 mil in diameter, and of course mine is 5.5. And if I can show you just the original size one, here it is. So there's the original size one, and here's typically the ones that you get in various kits, and you can see the size difference. And of course you could use bigger ones and drill out a hole, but it didn't quite work like that because it's got to fit in there, and then it's got to slide around within this, which is the underneath of the throttle sort of switch, throttle handlebar sort of control. So what I've done is I've started off with a much bigger one like that, and I've filed it down using a mini belt sander in a vise, and it's taken about half an hour, I suppose. If you can see that, and there's the original one. So quite pleased with that, because I'm really struggling to get, as I said, the right size nipple otherwise, and that fits nicely in there. So I'm getting there. Always seems like one step forward, two steps back, and I've been waiting for various bits and pieces, but invariably they're delayed, they don't turn up, and when they do turn up, they're the wrong size. Just crimped one end of this larger nipple into the vise, and I'm just using this fairly fine belt sander, mini belt sander, to just going to slim it down. And it's got to come down by about 1.5 millimeters, which doesn't sound a lot, but it would take a lot longer to file, obviously. And I've got to keep it nice and round. And then when I've got it to the right size, then I'll just file off each end. So yeah, give it a go. And there we have it, 2 nipples. And that fit nicely in there, that don't foul on the thing. And what I'll do, and I have to do it on the bike, is put the cable through there. I'll probably put something on it just to sort of hold it in place, stop it sort of rattling around. The hole down the middle is rather, well, I don't know if you can see that. The hole down the middle is rather big, but that was predetermined. That was not one that I've made. And of course it has to go that way, not that way. But anyway, in effect, it's almost like a little pot. It's a shame that it didn't have a stopper on the bottom. But in effect, it's just going to be there to hold the solder. And I might even try and just unwind the threads a little bit, so that in effect what it does to the core of the cable itself is to open it up a little bit, so when the solder sort of fits in and makes a good joint to the cable, that in itself will stop it pulling out through the hole, because it has a mechanical joint as well as a solder sort of metal flux joint. So that's the idea. If all else fails, I'll have to buy some custom made cables and send all the bits off to have those installed, because the 90-degree bends and that fit on the throttle pipes are all different threads, different lock nuts, and so on and so forth. So it's not just the length of the cable, it's actually the size, the nipples, and all the rest of it. So there we have it. So I can already hear half a dozen people saying, what, you're soldering your own nipples on? Yeah, I did have some reservations, thinking I need some specialist tools or some blow lamp or a specialist solder. But I watched Revival Motorcycles video on YouTube, and the guy was using a little pot and a blow lamp and special resin, and then he used electrical solder to actually solder it with. And this was this is how you do it professionally video. So the electrical solder already has a center core of resin, flux resin, or resin flux rather. And what that does, it's not, as the guy suggested, make it stick. It's nothing to do with glue. The resin, in effect, is used to make the solder, the molten tin and lead, flow. Hence it's called flux. And it does that by cleaning the surfaces of what you're soldering, even though you need to clean them first anyway. And that allows it to stick. So it doesn't make it stick, it allows it to stick because it cleans the surfaces. Anyway, just to sort of give you a bit of a demo. Just put the camera on the top with one hand, but I won't set up the tripod. So this is the nipple that I filled with solder with the cable that went through, and then I just sanded it off, and it came out the other side. Cut it and sanded it off. So let's try and break that. And as you can see, the stranded cable was broken before the actual nipple. It is really strong. So quite confident that this is going to work. These are the cables. They're actually quite thin compared to the some of the kits that have been sent. But I guess they may well be brake levers rather than throttle levers. So a nice thin cable. That goes in there, and that obviously goes on there, and that's you've got adjustment here, and you've got adjustment here. Now I've already done this once, but these just fell off when I was doing the brake levers. So what we have to do is pull off that sort of like rubber nipple and pull out this nylon insert. So because it's very difficult to push this cable up through there, round a bend, into the nylon insert. It's got to go in there and then out through the rubber nipple. So you've got to dismantle it to do it in parts. So we just check, this is the pull one, yeah, because that's opening the throttle bodies. So first of all, we have to slide it on through the adjustment 90°. Even that could be a little bit tricky. There we are, there we go. That goes through. Slide that on right the way into the outer sleeve. Okay. At this point I need to trim off the ends. I haven't trimmed them to sizes yet, for a very good reason. Every time you do this, the cable gets a bit flaky at the end. So you have to trim it off nice and tight to get it into that nylon sleeve, which is a sort of like a bearing sort of sleeve, low resistance. Let's put that down for a second. That goes in and lines in effect that metal to stop any wear, but also provides a nice slippy surface. And then the rubber nipple goes on the end. Okay, that pushes on now. Okay, that's one. You can't put these in the wrong one, because these, where they screw into the body of the throttle clamp, has different thread sizes, much bigger on the return. As you can see, so that's the return, much bigger thread, albeit a finer thread as well. So there's absolutely no chance of getting those two mixed up. So it should be that one. Right. So that is the pull part of the throttle, which goes on this side, and as you can see, the throttle cables now are going to sit nicely under the brake lever, not coming up over the top of it. Okay. This is quite fiddly because these have already fallen off once. I've done this once already. That's it. Right, okay, let's do the second one. Try not to let go of these two ends. Yep, and just giving enough there for any adjustment later. In terms of direction, push this onto the sleeves, and away we go. Oh. Of course, that's not around the right way. It's that way around. That's the cookie. Okay. Right, I'm just going to get a cable tie and hold that there. Because they're over the other side of the garage, which is always going to be a bit tricky. So obviously this is not the end position, but until everything's all tightened down and adjusted, I'm going to make sure there's enough slack on the throttle so you don't turn the handlebars, tightens the cables, and revs the bike, revs the engine. So I'll just hold that on there for a second. Right. Okay. That's all tightened up so that I can adjust any slack. So I did it from a position where there was no tightening of the inner cables against the outer by these adjusters, so that I knew the distance that these have to come out from in order to cut it and then solder on the new nipples. So just clamping this up while I solder it, using some foil to prevent any molten solder running back down the cable and jamming the throttle, and then using a mini belt file just to file off any excess solder from the nipple itself before reassembly. Right, so that's all assembled now. The throttle works really well, it's nice and free, good spring back, no binding or grating, so that's really pleased with that. And the handlebars have adjusted up and they're looking good too. I've still got to sort out the reservoirs, which I've been playing around with, and I'll cover that off in a separate video, but the clutch and the brake levers and so on. But yeah, that's a real success, so I'm very pleased with that. So until next time, in these mad times of coronavirus, wash your hands, stay healthy, and keep well away from me. Cheers.